Hello and welcome to another episode of Wolfie's Wheels. In this film we go to the Hegarty Festival of the Unexceptional and we look at all the Italian cars that were there. So there's a lot of Fiats, a couple of Alfas, and in fact there's also going to be an interloper from Spain because the car was based on an Italian design. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the film and I'll see you at the other end. And the first Latin lovely to look at is this Fiat Panda. The Fiat Panda was first made in 1980, even though the name lives on today in the Mark IV. The name, interestingly enough, has nothing to do with the furry animals, but it comes from the Roman goddess and patroness of travellers, Panda, which when they made the world car they decided they would shorten to Panda to give it a bit more zing, I suppose. But the Mark I Panda was designed by Giugiaro as a cheap, easy to maintain car, and part of the design brief was that it should weigh and cost no more than the Fiat 126 that it was replacing. And in fact, notice the flat glass on all the windows was really to simplify manufacture, and the side windows, for example, were interchangeable left to right. This particular car is a Mark II from 1993, so it's actually a Mark II facelifted car. It's 1108cc. The Mark II moved everything up a notch, and there are actually a lot of parts that are not compatible with the Mark I. But as you can see, this one, 1100S with the sunroof, etc., is a pretty much upmarket variant of the Panda. And as just mentioned, come across in the car park a more modern Fiat Panda. This is being a Fiat Panda 100, and it's got a 1.4 engine and 6 speeds, unique suspension, so it's got different dampers, bushes and things like that, and it produces 100 brake horsepower, which, as you imagine, in a Panda is a lot of fun. After they started making these in 2006, sadly emissions killed this car in 2010. Came across this very rare Fiat Strada Cabriolet. There's only 4 on the road at the moment in the UK, apparently another 28 on Sawn. But strangely, its sister car, which you can see in the picture about here, was shown at Castle Raby only a few weeks before, and I actually thought it was the same car. And started to talk to the owner as if I knew him from there, but I didn't. But I mean, what are the chances? Two of the 4 are virtually identical. So as I say, this one is a Fiat Strada Cabriolet, but they call it a Ritmo in all other markets. An urban myth has it that they called it the Strada in the UK and the US because in America, Ritmo is also a brand of sanitary towel, and they didn't think it would be appropriate to call a car with the same name, I guess particularly with a rag top. Anyway, they made these between 1983 and 1985, designed and made by Bertoni. As you can see from the film, the Bertoni badge is actually on the front rather than the Fiat badge. This particular one was registered in August 1984, so I'm guessing the proud first owner must have waited for the new registration, because at that time you used to get a new registration letter on the 1st of August. It was only once a year. And it was a big thing to have the latest registration number on your car. So a lot of people would wait till the 1st of August to have their car registered for the road. I mean, these are a really nice looking car, but in 2017, a Daily Telegraph panned the Strada Cabriolet, ranking it as the 6th worst Italian car ever made. I was a bit staggered to find that out, but when you read on in the article, which is online, they also had the Lancia Beta as number 2. And what a great piece of design the Beta is. So quite frankly, what does the Telegraph know? I'll leave you to decide that for yourselves. I came across this iconic car while wandering around. It's the Fiat Nueva 500, which was introduced in 1957, and ultimately they made something like 3.9 million of them. They called it Nueva 500 to differentiate it from the previous small Fiat, which is called a Topolino or Little Mouse. But calling it an iconic design is not really over-egging it, because it's so good that the New York Museum of Modern Art actually featured the Fiat 500 in a special exhibition called The Value of Good Design. It's absolutely amazing, really. They made all sorts of different versions of these. They made semi-convertibles, estates, panel vans, and a car called the Jolly, which I think was made by Gear, which is hasn't got any sides on it, basically, and sort of a roof and wicker seats. Pretty incredible. I mean, this tiny little car is only 2.9 metres long and weighs something like 499 kilograms. Anyway, the early cars had sort of suicide doors, and in 1965 they started putting conventional front hinge doors on these cars. The early ones just had 13 brake horsepower and sort of progressed in size and output. So by 1971, the Rinnovata 594cc's had 18 brake horsepower. So they were starting to go in the right direction. This particular car is a 1968 499cc car. I think it's a 500F. Interestingly as well, or interesting to me, this little Fiat 500 in 1958 gave birth really to Abarth tuning, as they took one of these and took 7 records at Monza. But the Abarth story is a whole new thing. Anyway, production of these cars actually eventually ended in 1975, even though the 126, which was meant to replace it, was actually launched in 1973. But it wasn't as successful in Italy, it wasn't 126, but it sold better in other markets than the Fiat 500. But nevertheless, what a car. This lovely red Fiat Cinquecento, owned by a friend of mine called Riley. You might have seen his Sicento Schumacher edition, which I'll just refresh your mind with about now, when it was at Castle Raby in the Castle Raby film. The Zinc, as it's known, replaced the 126, and it's made in Tychy in Poland, which is actually where the current Fiat 500 is made. The Cinquecento, like this, is actually called a Type 170, and they made them between 1991 and 1998, making just over about 1.2 million units. It's still very small, 3.2 metres long, so it's sort of about 30 centimetres longer than the 1957 design car that we've just seen. So it's small by modern standards, but still getting bigger. This particular one is in the sporting trim, it's 1100cc, 53 brake horsepower, close ratio gearbox, red seat belts, sports seats, rev counters. And this particular car, registered in April 98, is quite a late car, with the airbag type steering wheel, which is right for this car, but not as attractive as the ones fitted to earlier cars, which we'll see a bit later in this film. This lovely white Fiat 125S comes from 1970, so it's sort of mid-range because they made the 125 between 1967 and 73. Apparently there's only 3 of these left on the UK roads at the moment. The S actually was, which is what this is, it was made between 68 and 70, so it was even a shorter production run than the relatively short production run overall of the 125. There's a 1600cc engine, 100 brake horsepower, 5-speed gearbox, and really was pretty sporty for the time, you know, sub a 10-second 0 to 60 time. Now this design, of course, you'll be familiar with because it lived on in the Polski Fiat as the 125P right up until 1991, and in fact the later FSO Polonaise was also based on the 125. This particular car is in outstanding condition. It was first used in Malta, was latterly in a museum actually in Malta and brought over in 2013. Obviously well loved, well used. It's done sort of like 13 or 15,000 miles since a refurb in 2015, so the guy obviously likes it and is proud of it, and quite rightly so. This lovely red Alfa Giulia Super variant Type 105, because of course the name still lives on now, so if you talk about Alfa Giulias, you kind of need to know which one you're talking about. These were built between 62 and 78, and is actually, this one is a 1971 car, 1570cc, an impressive 97 brake horsepower. The Super, which is what this is, was launched at the 1965 Geneva show, and the serpent crest that you can see on the C-pillar is one of the differentiators between this and the lower models, along with other improvements like a sportier steering wheel, instruments, twin double choke Weber carbs, etc., etc. And they actually stopped making the Super in 1972, so that was sort of some 6 years before the overall end of production. So you come to the Festival of the Unexceptional and you expect to see some fairly unusual cars. Now, this car that you're looking at now, the Alfa Arna, is absolutely unusual. There is only one, yes, one in existence in the UK, and this is it. The Arna was actually a bit of an oddity. It was a joint venture between Nissan and Alfa, styled by Nissan, and the running gear was from Alfa. So kind of a bit like the Citroën SM, you know, what could possibly go wrong? The poor old Alfa Arna was widely panned at the time. It had a very hard act to follow because it was trying to follow the Alfa Sud, which was so well thought of in terms of styling and handling and everything else. But all this negativity does make a very rare survivor. They made these for 4 years, between 83 and 87, and only actually made 53,000 of them at the time. Alfa basically went bust, were bought by Fiat, and the whole project was canned. Here we have another Cinquecento Type 170 Sporting, also in red. They didn't make many different colours. You could just get them in yellow, red, black, grey, metallic, and a metallic blue. And there's a picture at the little end of this section of the different colours you could get apart from the grey one, because it wasn't there on the day. Anyway, this one was all registered in August 1995, as I said earlier, presumably for the registration, which was a big thing at the time. And you can see some differences to the one we saw earlier in this film. For example, the steering wheel. Now these Cinquecento Sportings are getting a lot rarer. There's about 550 on Sawn, 117 registered for the road, and you know, this is down from something like 12,000 back just a few years ago, you know, 15, 20 years ago. So they're getting rarer and rarer. Now, not actually made in Italy, but very much based on the Fiat design, so I thought I'd lump it in with the Italian jobs. We got this lovely Seat Marbella Splash. Now, Seat did make in Spain a Panda-based car as well between 1980 and 1986, but in 1986 to 1998 they made the Marbella, which was basically different to a Panda, at a different front and back. The tail lights and boot panel are different, for example, and the sloping front panel, all of which really mean that there's not really that many interchangeable parts, despite what you might think. This one is a 1991 car, 850 engine, 34 brake horsepower, and a heady 78 miles an hour top speed. There were lots of special editions made. The Splash, like this year's, was running July 91 to September 91, and actually cost $3,998 when it was new, which was quite a lot of money, I think, back then. So Fiat, being ever the opportunists, decided to jump on the bandwagon of Italia 90, and they made this sort of limited edition Fiat Panda Italia 90 just for a few months. They made it for 3 months between April and June 1990, and it is a special edition of the Panda 750. So it had a special interior, badging, wheel trims, but the running gear, etc., was the same as the normal car. What I really like about this one is the number plate, because this isn't a show plate. The number plate is EUI 990 or EU 1990, and rather tickles me. But they're pretty well sought after car. There's actually a special register for the Italia 90 online. There's 9 on the UK register and 22 elsewhere in Europe. So if you know of the whereabouts of one of these cars, then certainly head over there and see if it's on the register, and get the owner, if it's not you, to join up with the register. I'll just show you a little glimpse of things to come. It's not actually Italian, although it is based on the Fiat 128, but as I say, it's a little teaser of a future film that's going to come out from behind the Iron Curtain. Well, I hope you enjoyed that film. If you did, please feel free to share, tell your friends, etc. You may even like to subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, it doesn't make no money out of it myself. Just give it a thumbs up even. And as I say, if you liked it, that's all great. Thank you so much for watching, it's much appreciated, and I look forward to seeing you in a future episode of our Wolfie's Wheels. Bye.